Living longer, living healthier, living better than ever before. Welcome to Mountain Pacific's Healthy Living for Life, a weekly series that gives you the information, education, and expert insight you need to become an active participant in today's ever-changing healthcare climate. Here now is today's program host.
Identity theft occurs more often than you think. In fact, each year, millions of people fall victim to this faceless crime. What can you do to make sure it doesn't happen to you? Today's experts are from the Montana Department of Justice and the Department of Insurance. They're here to discuss warning signs and share simple steps you can take to avoid becoming a victim of fraud. Welcome to this episode of Healthy Living for Life, a show dedicated to helping you do just that. I'm your host, Lisa Sather. Stay tuned. My guests are Attorney General Tim Fox from the Montana Department of Justice and Ryan Sullivan, Investigator, Office of Consumer Protection. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Hey, thanks, Lisa.
Thank you. So first, let's talk about some of the common types of email scams that consumers may come across. You know, the phishing, the spam scams, and can you tell us how our viewers can look out for those and what they can do?
Sure. So with the advent of the internet and mobile devices, computers and all of that, we're seeing a real rise in phishing and spam email scams. Now, phishing is spelled P-H-I-S-H-I-N-G. And what these are is they tend to be very sophisticated. They look very legitimate. They're emails that may show up in your email box that ask you for personal information or possibly even threaten that they're going to stop a service or cancel a credit card or something like that. And they look very legitimate. They have company logos on them often, and they really are designed to make you fall for a scam. And so we're just making sure that Montana consumers are aware of this and that they be very, very cautious. We suggest that if you get an email like this, first of all, you need to know that businesses like your banks, credit card companies and whatnot don't do business this way. They don't ask for personal information from your over the email. They might be asking for your bank account number or your credit card number or maybe a social security number, or they're suggesting that you need to click on a link to go update your personal information, make a payment, whatnot. And again, legitimate businesses don't do business this way. And certainly we want to make sure that Montana consumers don't ever share their personal information like bank account and credit account numbers, social security, what have you, over the email. This is a very insecure way to do things. One way they can protect themselves is if they get an email that looks legitimate from a business or a charity or an organization that they actually know and perhaps interact with, call that company, call the bank, call the credit card company. There's a number on the back of your card, and make sure that it's legitimate, and don't be pressured or threatened into making an immediate response, which you may end up doing any number of things. And if you feel like you've compromised your information, you want to call that bank or that credit card company or that organization and have them take the account down or cancel the credit card. These are some of the things that Montana consumers can do to protect themselves, but just be very suspicious.
Thank you, thank you. Wonderful. So Ryan, let's talk a little bit about some of the common internet scams that are out there. I believe they're called adware or spyware. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So adware and spyware is software that's installed on your computer without your knowledge or consent. It can track and monitor your computer usage. We tell folks to look for signs on their computer that they might have contracted one of these viruses. You'll see sluggish computer performance. You'll see a barrage of pop-ups. Your web browser might take you to sites that you wouldn't normally go to, the icons, toolbars, and it's important to recognize these so you can get your computer repaired. We recommend that people always update their operating software, their web browser software, always use antivirus, and just make sure they're being careful where they click. Any sorts of pop-ups or spam emails, we really want to be careful where we're navigating on the internet.
Great, thank you. Attorney General Fox, any information or anything you can give us on social media site scams, Facebook, those kinds of things?
Well, you know, what we see oftentimes is you'll get messages over Facebook or social media accounts, again, asking for personal information. Perhaps there's a link for an online jackpot type game or what have you. And we just, again, recommend that you be very suspicious and cautious of these things, particularly when they come to from someone that you don't know, and that you don't, again, share any personal information over the internet through these social network sites, and that you don't click on any of the links, because you might get the malware, and you might also be duped into giving some personal information that you'll regret later.
Thank you. So we have about, a minute or minute and a half left. So I really do want to hear about what happened to you a couple years ago, because it sounds like you were the victim of a social media scam.
Right. You know, none of us are immune to this. Someone actually used a photograph off one of my websites to go online and create an online dating site, and unfortunately a woman in Indiana was scammed out of $150,000. I guess she fell in love with this individual. Turns out it was a Nigerian national. After law enforcement got involved, the woman reported it. There were 2 other women from Ohio that actually fell for this. The guy called himself John Tony Hagan and used my photograph. Law enforcement in Indiana and New Jersey eventually tracked him down. He had left the country. But when he came back, they were able to apprehend him. He was prosecuted. He got 36 months in jail with all but 26 suspended, had to pay restitution and a $16,000 fine. So again, no one's immune to these things. My wife joked when I told her about this, she joked that she didn't know what those women saw in me. And it's really no laughing matter, of course, and so everyone should be very cautious about being on the internet, sharing personal information, and certainly not giving money to people you don't know.
Wow, that's a crazy story. So thank you for sharing that with us. Well, thank both of you, and we're going to take a short break here. We'll be right back after this commercial to learn more how you can safeguard yourself. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Healthy Living for Life. We're continuing our discussion on senior safety with our guests, Attorney General Tim Fox from the Montana Department of Justice and Ryan Sullivan, investigator from the Office of Consumer Protection. Con artists also use telephones as a way to get people's information for fraudulent purposes, I understand, Ryan. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about common phone scams and how folks can protect themselves from these types of fraud.
Sure. So a common phone scam that we have a lot of reports on is called the grandparent scam. And the grandparent scam basically goes like this. They target an elderly person. It's a cold call. They'll call the elderly person, they'll say, and basically pretend to be the grandchild. They'll say, "Hi, Grandma, it's me, I'm in trouble." They'll come up with a story and say they've been in a car accident, or they've been obtained by law enforcement in a foreign country for drugs, or they'll say that they have been arrested for a DUI. And there's many different variations of the scam, but they all lead back to one thing, and that's to wire fast cash. They'll ask that the cash be wired through Western Union, through MoneyGram, or through a prepaid debit card. Again, there's different variations of the scam, but that's the one common factor. We've got many videos on our websites. We've got a team of investigators. People are more than willing, or more than likely, or they can call our office. We can go through these types of scams and give them tips and pointers on what to watch out for.
Great, thank you. So Attorney General Fox, if someone does encounter a scam, would you recommend they call the Department of Justice? Do they call the police department? And if so, what happens from there?
Sure, it somewhat depends on the nature of how they've been scammed, whether there's a large amount of money involved or property or what have you. These are crimes, so you can call your local law enforcement, but the Office of Consumer Protection at the Montana Department of Justice is specifically tasked with helping consumers in these areas. And so the website will be on your screen, and your viewers can go to that website. They can file an online complaint, or they can contact the Office of Consumer Protection just if they're suspicious about something and they want to describe it and have our investigators help them determine whether or not it's legitimate.
Great, thank you. So Ryan, you're one of the Office of Consumer Protection's investigators, so tell us a little bit about the work you're doing to keep Montanans safe.
One of the main things we like to do is we want to educate consumers in Montana before they run into the scams and the fraud and the bad business practices. We have an outreach program. We'd love to visit your organization, your church group, or just a group of folks that want to learn more about what our office does. We take tips and complaints in our office. We negotiate and mediate complaints from consumers against businesses to try to come to some sort of fair resolution for the consumer.
Great. Well, the free presentations are a great service to our Montana citizens for sure. So could you give us a quick overview maybe on how many cases of fraud your office investigates every year?
So every year we receive approximately 5,000 phone calls, and of those 5,000 phone calls, 3,000 are a report of actual scams. And of the 3,000 reports, roughly 1,000 are the IRS scam. So we get a lot of reports, and we work really hard to try to let folks know about the things to watch out for and the things we can help with.
Great, thank you. So mail-based fraud. Can we talk quickly about mail-based fraud? Maybe Attorney General Fox can give us some information on how viewers can watch out for that.
Well, certainly that's the old school part of it, mail-based fraud. And again, a lot of these solicitations ask for personal information in reply. It's best to distrust and verify as opposed to trust and verify. And certainly if it looks like it's a legitimate organization that you've heard of before, sometimes they use a permutation of a name. Let's say the American Cancer Society is a legitimate organization. They might call it the Cancer Society of America. Could be a charity. So again, my recommendation with folks is that they stick with local businesses and charities, people they know and have done business with before. And if they're dealing with a mail solicitation of some sort, certainly don't share your personal information unless you verified that this is a legitimate organization.
Good. Do you have any examples of any mail-based fraud that have occurred recently? Anything local?
Well, one we can tell you is we actually had a national multi-state investigation and lawsuit against a company that was pretending to be a cancer-type society and literally got millions of dollars from donors who were well-intentioned and wanted to help, but these individuals ended up spending that money on themselves, cars, fancy homes. Ryan's office was deeply involved in that and running that down and shutting them down.
Oh my goodness, well thank you for that work. That's pretty fantastic. So we just have maybe 30 seconds. Ryan, do you have any thoughts on whether or not there'll be more scams targeting Montanans in the future, and if so, why?
Yeah, there's always going to be scams. They're just going to be tweaked a little bit each time, and again, it's watching out for the common factors of each scam. The scammer wants to grab your emotion. They want you to make an emotional decision. They're always going to ask for fast cash, and they want you to make that quick decision. We want people to hang up the phone like on these folks. If they have questions, talk to family, talk to friends, and talk to us. Call the Office of Consumer Protection. There's no call that's too small or too big for our office. We're willing to take on just about anything.
Well, that has been such great information today, both you gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here and sharing this with our viewers. It's something that everyone needs to be educated about, so we certainly do appreciate that. So up next, you'll hear about the types of insurance and securities fraud. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Our next guests are Montana State Auditor Matt Rosendale and Sherry Meyer, Investigator, Montana Commissioner of Securities and Insurance. Thank you, Matt and Sherry, for being here today.
Thanks for having us in, Lisa.
Wonderful. Well, Matt, can you tell us a little bit about your role as State Auditor?
Well, the first thing I like to clarify, any opportunity that I get, is what the office actually does. The Montana Constitution identifies us as the State Auditor's Office, when in reality, we don't audit anything. My own title is the Commissioner of Securities and Insurance. And what the agency does is they're charged with being the consumer advocate or the regulator for the securities and insurance industry. And we basically are the watchdog to make sure that we can identify fraud or illegal activities within those industries and protect the consumer.
Good information. I always thought there was an audit going on as well, so thank you for that. So tell me a little bit about how you do work to protect the consumers from insurance and securities fraud. I'd like to hear about that.
Well, I'll tell you, we are very fortunate to have a group of incredible public servants that work at the agency, and we are a criminal justice agency. So we have the authority to investigate and prosecute these crimes, which very few other departments do have that authority. So while it's good to see the prosecution take place, every home needs to be built on a solid foundation. And where that prosecution begins is with our great investigators. And we've brought one of those with us here today, Sherry Meyer, to talk about some of the things that folks can watch out for so that we don't even get to the place where we have to prosecute. Maybe they can catch them ahead of time.
Great. Well, thanks for coming again, Sherry.
And thank you, Lisa.
You bet. So it's great to have you with us. Let's talk a little bit about the common types of insurance fraud that consumers should be aware of and what they should look out for.
Okay, well, there are 4 common types of schemes out there with insurance fraud. We see agent broker insurance fraud. We see the fake insurance companies and associations. We see individuals who decide to commit consumer insurance fraud. And then we also see service provider insurance fraud. To give you a little bit of description of each, the agent broker insurance fraud, in the state of Montana, you have to either be licensed to sell, to negotiate, and to solicit any type of insurance plan out there. Oftentimes we get individuals who determine that they don't need those licenses. They're going to come to the state of Montana either, via internet, phone calls, and or in person. And they're unlicensed. They've not gone through that licensure. They're there for one thing, and that's their personal gain. And so if you receive a phone call from an individual, first and foremost, do not give private information over the phone. If you get pushed by them, ask them for a phone number, ask them for their insurance license number, and ask them for their specific spelling of their name. Those 3 things you can also then take and verify through the Commissioner's office. Contact our office. We have a list of all licensed agents and brokers in the state of Montana. Secondly, we have licensed agents. And it's been unfortunate, but we do have insurance agents take advantage of persons. They do so in 2 different ways. We've seen individuals who misrepresent the product, or they misrepresent something on the application process. They do this because they earn a commission for every policy that they sell. So it behooves them to get that policy in place, one way or the other. We've had instances where individuals are harmed to the point that they might have a claim denied or actually have their policy rescinded because they've signed on the dotted line and accepted whatever was attested to in that application. So again, always a very good idea to read. Take the time. If the agent doesn't like you reading, that's too bad. That's your business, not his. Secondly, we've seen situations where premium is stolen. It's very easy to do. An insurance agent is to keep a trust account, a fiduciary trust account. If you pay that insurance agent and all of a sudden you realize you're not getting an ID card, you're not getting your policy, maybe a certificate of insurance, ask that agent. And if you're not getting the questions answered the way you think you should, follow up either by contacting the insurance company direct or contact the Commissioner of Securities and Insurance, and we'll investigate it for you. I've talked about the fake insurance companies. Insurance companies who contact a person, or associations who contact a person, they may come out there and sound like a company that's already existent. Like the agents and brokers, the insurance companies have to be either licensed or registered with the state of Montana. So again, we have all the names. If you have a question and you think that perhaps somebody's given you a wrong answer, contact the insurance commissioner's office and we can verify the registration or licensure of that insurance company. First and foremost, we always tell people, do not give personal information out there. Don't give your bank account. They just take the premium and have no intention of paying a claim out there. Unfortunately, we see consumer fraud. As the Commissioner of Securities and Insurance Office, we are a member of the National Insurance Crime Bureau. And according to the National Insurance Crime Bureau statistics, 10% of all insurance claims that are filed are fraudulent.
I'm sorry we're out of time today. I'd like to thank my guests. We'll talk to you next week.
Healthy Living for Life is brought to you by Mountain Pacific Quality Health. We'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions for future programs, visit our website at mpqhf.org or call us at 406-443-4020. You can also catch us on YouTube by visiting our website and clicking on the YouTube icon. Special thanks to Fire Tower Coffee House and Roasters. Production facilities provided by Video Express Productions.